Well, today we're going to do something that we haven't done in a very, very long time. We are going to be looking at this morning only 3 verses. Like, that's something we don't normally do. Normally, we do full paragraphs and 12 to 15 verses, but today we're only going to look at 3 verses. We're going to pick up the pace starting next week. So, our goal is that we're going to wrap up the Gospel of John just after Easter, and that we'll actually get to the part that Easter speaks of on Easter morning. We will find ourselves in that spot here in the Gospel of John. So if you truly grasp what Jesus is saying here in these 3 verses, and if we apply what Jesus is saying in these 3 verses that we're looking at, it's actually going to radically transform our life, our mindset, our actions. Everything will be different if we truly grasp what we're going to see this morning. I'm especially excited that we do have our kids in service today, because the sooner that our kids learn these principles, the more they will too be encouraged, and they'll have a right biblical outlook on life. So kids, put on your thinking caps, focus in as best you can, because this is for you guys too. So before we look at these 3 verses, I want to let you understand how we need to understand these 3 verses, how we need to look at these verses, and how Jesus lays out. So the first thing that Jesus is going to do is he's going to give us a command. So everybody say command. Awesome. The second thing he's going to do is say, how do we accomplish this plan? And then the third thing that's going to happen is we're going to see the result of doing this plan and the encouragement to do this plan. So first we're going to see Jesus give a command. We're going to see how we are supposed to accomplish that plan. And then we're going to have the result or the encouragement of this plan. And so since we're in a school, I want to give an example of school to help us to understand how this principle works. So let's give you an example. So a command. The command is get a schooling diploma. That's the command that your parents may have given you. How do you accomplish that plan? You show up to your lesson. You pay attention during your lesson. You study well. You do your homework. And you don't give up. Like, that is what you need to be doing in order to accomplish the command. The result and encouragement to accomplish the command is that you will be better equipped to accomplish the mission that God has invited you into. You'll be better prepared to read, to write, to speak, and to accomplish all the tasks that life would present to you. And this will result in a more purposeful, meaningful, and fulfilling life. So today's verses spoken by Jesus, written by John, and presented before us today follow that same pattern. So let's go ahead and look at all 3 verses together, starting with John 14, verse 1. It says this, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me." Verses 2 and 3 says this, "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be." So here's what we have our pattern before us this morning. First, we have the command. The command is, let not your heart be troubled. So that's our command this morning. That is what we are told to do. Let not your hearts be troubled. And then second, we're given how to accomplish this plan. Believe in God, believe also in me. You want to know how to accomplish that plan? This is what you do. Believe in God, believe also in me. And then in verse 3, 2 and 3, we're given the encouragement and the results of accomplishing this plan. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you also, or you may be also. So let's break it down and let's see today how this works. If you really take this to heart, like seriously, if you really take what we're going to share to heart, that will transform your mindset and will transform your outlook on life. So let's go ahead, starting with verse 1, John 14, verse 1. Let your hearts not be troubled. That's kind of important. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. So the first thing we're looking at, let not your hearts be troubled. Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he gives them this command. But this isn't a command in the same sense that we don't want to do this. Like sometimes we'll be given a command that we do not want to do. Sometimes we'll be told to clean our rooms, and we're like, no, that's not a command we want to do. Wash the dishes, mow the yard. These are commands that we're told to do. We should obey our parents, but we often are like, I just don't really want to do that. But who here would say, let not your heart be troubled? I just prefer being troubled. Like, I prefer just to be filled with anxiety, filled with doubt, filled with depression. That's just how I roll. That's my main. Now, some of us may have been living in that for such a long time that we feel like that is just normal, but it's not. Jesus tells us, let not your heart be troubled. It's not something that Jesus is commanding that we should begrudgingly do. It's something that we should all want to do. This command is something that we should desire to do, aim to do. But if we're honest with ourselves, we find ourselves failing often at doing this. We find ourselves struggling with this. So what exactly does it mean by the term heart and troubled? Well, we know what the heart is, right? The heart is an organ that pumps blood through our whole body. It keeps us alive. It's a very good thing. The Bible uses this term, though, to refer to the heart as our emotional state. The heart is our outpouring of our mind. Our heart is what? Our feelings, right? So if we're talking about our feelings, it's often referred to as that we're speaking from the heart. And so that's what the Bible is referring to today. But what about not be troubled? What Jesus is saying, let your emotions not be troubled. Let your feelings not be troubled. Do not be disturbed. Do not be afraid. And Jesus gives us the absolute opposite of what it means to be troubled a few verses later. Let's pull up on the screen John 14:27. In John chapter 14:27, it says these words. It says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. So the opposite of letting our hearts not be troubled is letting our hearts be filled with peace, making sure that we have peace. So what we discover is that Jesus is giving us the command to enter into peace instead of troubled. Peace instead of anxiety. Peace instead of being distraught. So why does he have to tell the disciples this? Well, Jesus certainly knows what our emotions and our feelings are, but remember what actually led up to this happening. Just a few moments ago, a couple of weeks ago, when we were discussing it, Judas was going to betray Jesus. And Judas actually at this point had already left to go do that very thing, to go and betray Jesus. Next, Peter, what we found out last week, Peter stands up and declares that he's going to lay his life down for Jesus. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, well, that's great, but you're going to deny me 3 times before this night is over. And have you ever been in a situation where it seems as if like all the air has been sucked out of the room? Well, I can imagine that it was something similar to that. As Judas had left, as Peter finds out that he's going to deny Jesus instead of lay his life down, everyone is still and quiet. Nobody moves. Everyone is anxious to know what they should do next. Yet Jesus goes up to his disciples and encourages them with what they desperately desired, but they couldn't figure out how do they achieve this. They wanted peace, but all they had was their troubled hearts. I want to pause here for a moment because it's something that all of us can relate to. We live in a fallen and broken world filled with fallen and broken people all around us, and we too are fallen and broken people. So what can your heart be troubled about? Everything. Like, what is there not to be troubled about? Especially in today's day and age. I know we talk about it, but we're in a situation that's unlike anything that at least we've experienced in our generation. Now, if we go years back through history, we see that there's nothing new under the sun. But, like, there is so much for us to be troubled about. There's so much for us to have anxiety about, to have doubt about. And so what is happening in your life that's causing you currently worry or anxiety or depression? I'm sure you can name tons of them. If you've been journeying with my family recently, you've heard about what we've been going through as a family. So, before COVID happened, we were working on building a house out on our property. We have 5 acres of land, and we're super excited to build on this property. And we had our bank loan together. We had our house all picked out and designed, and we were getting ready to figure out where we were going to put all of the building materials when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, the banks pulled out, our builders pulled out, and we were left stranded on our property. Now, we did have a camper, and we still do have a camper, which is a blessing. So we're not using TPs and going all old school out on our property. So we do have that. We have running water. We do have electricity, which is a blessing. But for months after months, we weren't able to do anything except be there on our property with no hope or anything in sight. When things started coming back then, we were excited and we anticipated things happening and moving forward, but then banks wouldn't loan to us because of what our financial situation due to COVID and what happened. And so we continued to be stranded there with no hope in sight. When we finally did get a bank loan, all it would allow us for is a single wide trailer, which we were thankful and blessed for that. And so we pursued that and we kept going through it. But then as inflation hit and things that were missed on the builder's part, we kept getting more fees to the point that it was just now an outrageous amount to pay for what we were getting, and we had to pull out of that. And so where we find ourselves today is that we're starting from square one once again, trying to figure out how we're going to get a house, and coming up on 3 years with 8 kids living in a camper. There's a lot of anxiety when you have 8 kids in a camper. Like, let me tell you, there's anxiety through the roof on all this. But what is the answer that we're told to do? Find a new loan? Move someplace else? Start on our TP? No. Actually, we're given the answer is to trust God. Believe in God. Believe in Jesus. But what is that going to do to get the house fixed? See, we often get so focused on the here and now. We often get so focused in on our plan that we forget that there's a greater plan that we're being invited into. What are you going through in your life right now that would be different if you looked at it not from your current situation, but look through it through the lens of what God's plan is, what you are called to do, and what would it look like if we looked at our situations in light of eternity? How would that transform and change the way we look at things? These issues have definitely caused myself, especially my wife, great anxiety and frustrations. But we're told not to let our hearts be troubled. I know our family may be unique, but we are not alone in our troubled hearts. We're not alone in what we're dealing with. Even in the midst of division, in the midst of viruses, in the midst of inflation, and probably the worst thing that could possibly have ever happened, a Major League Baseball lockout, we are called to still be united together with the hope of what is to come. And hopefully a deal will come and spring training can start and the Tigers can play the Yankees again. That's my hope. But we're called to let our hearts not be troubled. How are we supposed to remain encouraged like this? Let's see the answer. John chapter 1, or chapter 14, verse 1, the second part says this: believe in God, believe also in me. The cure for our troubled heart is to believe in the one who holds our heart in his hands. The one who created you understands you. The one who breathed life into you is also the one who knows your circumstances. What is his answer for your troubled heart? It's his heart. You want to know what the answer is? It's believe in God and believe also in Jesus. Now, those who are more intellectually inclined may say, hold on, this doesn't make sense. Isn't Jesus the Son of God? Isn't God the Trinity, and Jesus, isn't he not also God? What does this mean? Is Jesus saying that he is not God by saying it like this? Well, no. Jesus is not separating himself from God, but actually including himself on the same level as God. Believe in God. Believe also in me. God is the answer, which means Jesus is also the answer. We see this call to focus on God in the midst of everything throughout the Bible. One of my favorite verses is in Matthew, and I'm sure you've heard something similar to this before, even if you haven't read Matthew. Matthew 6:31 through 33 says this: "Therefore do not be anxious, saying, 'What shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear?' For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all." And here's what we're told to do: "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." When we look away from God, we will be wrought with troubles and concerns and situations and heartaches and sadness and anxiety. The cure for these is to look to God, to seek out God's kingdom, to seek out his righteousness. Now hear me. I'm not saying this morning, this is important, I'm not saying there are not real medical issues and real clinical depression. We do live in a fallen and broken world, and these are real issues. I'm not saying that it is simply look to God and all the pain and sorrows instantly vanish. What I am saying, and what Jesus is saying, is that our hope will not be found in anything else. Our purpose and meaning will not be found in any other remedy. No amount of pills or doctors or therapy will be able to give you what God has already purchased. Like, hear that this morning. I'm not discounting these things. I'm saying that in and of themselves, you will still have the same situation apart from God. So yes, therapy, counseling, sometimes medicine will help with the effects of the fallen and brokenness of ourselves. But our ultimate need is not a prescription. Our ultimate need is Jesus. The answer will always be Jesus. So what does it mean to believe in God? Do I just yell, "I believe in God," and like Genie from Aladdin pops out of a magic lamp and everything is great and wonderful? Well, no. We must understand that when the Bible uses believe, it's not meaning just that we acknowledge that God is real. It must be more than just a realization that God is the creator and the sustainer of all things. It actually goes beyond an intellectual understanding. Let's look at James on the screen, chapter 2, verse 19. It says, "You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe," and what do? They shudder. The demons believe that God is real. The demons believe that God is the creator, the sustainer, the Alpha and Omega. The demons know firsthand the power, the majesty, the supremacy of God. They know this and they shudder. Yet this is what many who claim to be Christian think of when they say they believe. I know God exists, therefore I believe. I post Bible verses on social media, therefore I believe. I know key parts of the Bible and can have a debate with you over the end times, therefore I must believe. I know that our government needs Jesus, therefore I believe. Actually, none of these things make you a Christian. Authentic Christian belief is not less than believing the facts about God. Nobody can be a Christian that does not believe about God, the facts about God. So it's not less than believing the facts about God, but it's absolutely more than believing just the facts about God. The question that needs to be answered is, do you believe the facts to be true? And are you trusting in the facts? Are you relying upon the facts? Now, this is perhaps a cheesy demonstration that you may have seen before. I'm going to take this for a second. But it does help us to understand a lot better what this means. What we have before us today is a chair. Say hi, chair. All right, kiddos. So we have ourselves a chair here. Now, what can you tell me about this chair? Yes. It's made out of plastic, absolutely. You think we have some metal in this chair too? A little bit of metal in it, a little bit of metal. Plastic, metal. What's it in the shape of? Yes. It's black, yep. In the shape of a chair. Yeah, exactly. It's the shape of a chair. Now, we can know all the different things about this chair. We can know that it's black, as said, that it's made out of plastic. It has some metal parts. It's exactly a chair. But knowing the facts about this chair doesn't do anything if that's all that we do is sit and look at this chair. The same thing if all we do is know the facts about God, but we do not rest and rely on God. That is the difference between whether we claim to be a Christian or not and actually a Christian. Now, what we're called to do as Christian is not only believe everything like we believe in the chair, but what must we do? We must sit in the chair, right? We must trust. This is where viral videos happen, so I hope nothing happens. All right. So we have to sit in the chair. We have to trust in this chair. We have to rest in this chair. We have to lean. I better not do that. We have to embrace what it is that this chair is. And that's what we're called to do as believers. So listen to me this morning. If you want to know what it means to believe in God, it's not just believing that God is true like we believe this chair is true. It's do we believe, do we rest, do we trust, do we sit down like we do in the chair? Are we doing that with God? Are we trusting in God to sustain us like I trust that chair and like you trust that chair to sustain? Is it so ingrained in your mind as you walk in, you don't even think about sitting down in these chairs? You just do it because you have that much faith and trust in what the chair is. Do you have that mindset with God? Because that is the difference between an authentic faith and the difference between knowing about God but not relying and trusting in God. Let's use the chair illustration from a different angle. Last week, Mike, who runs our sound system, him and I were trying to fix this light right here. We were trying to position it. And so I grab the chair, I bring it over, and Mike gives me that look. He's like, I'm not standing on that. Like, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm like, okay, no worries. I'm going to get on here. I'm going to stand on it. I'm going to adjust the light. And that's fine. But here's the difference is that I knew the facts about this chair. I knew that this chair could hold 450 pounds, and thankfully I'm not quite there yet. And so this chair can sustain very well. So I got up on the chair, I adjusted the lights, and I held my ground when it came to purchasing these chairs because I have kind of an obsession with these chairs. I'm just going to be honest. Many of you that are new don't know what I had to go through to get these chairs, but I love these chairs. So we'll talk about that later. But my thought is, never mind. But what I knew is that we needed to put into practice what this actually means, to actually live out and to do. And so I put into practice standing on that chair, putting the trust and belief in that chair. But here's where I failed, okay? I didn't tell Mike about the chair. I didn't say, Mike, no, it's okay. Here, this can hold 450 pounds. These are the industry standard chairs. This is what you can do. You can trust in these chairs. No, I just did it myself. And that's where the illustration falls completely short because I should have told him. But that's what we get to do as believers and where we often fall too, is we'll tell people about God sometimes, but do we really actually share who God is? And do we stop as far as saying the facts about God, or do we demonstrate what it means to actually live in faith, to live that we truly believe in these things? Again, it's more than just knowing the facts. It's more than just that. We have to actually live and do and trust and believe in them. So knowing about God is absolutely vital and it's important. And you can't display authentic faith without putting your faith and trust in. But are you here today and you know about God, you know about the Bible, you could win a trivia Bible contest if you had to. You could probably go toe-to-toe with me on a biblical debate, but you're not trusting and relying on God in every day of your life. Listen to me, you're not saved by works. You can't earn this, but you respond to it. Do you know God and are you trusting in God? Do you know God and relying on God? Do you know God and resting on God? And you must ask yourself this question. You must test yourself to this. Is your belief more than just facts? Do you want your heart to not be troubled? Then you must have biblical belief that is more than just a factual belief. All right, now let's go to the encouragement part of this. John 14:2-3. So we have the command. We have how to accomplish the command, and now the encouragement. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Immediately, if you've been around Christianity for any length of time, you'll want to talk about God's big house. Perhaps you were raised in the KJV and you think one day you'll have your own mansion. These are like exciting things. Like, I'm going to have my own mansion one day. This is going to be incredible. This is going to be awesome. I'm already thinking about how I'm decorating it. So So here we go. Before I crush your dreams, get to the mansion part, I want us to see directly how this correlates to what we just spoke about. Jesus says, I will come again. I will take you to myself. When it comes to letting your heart not be troubled, it is to believe in God and to believe also in Jesus. Jesus then says that he will come again and he will take you to himself. Are you trusting that that's going to happen? Are you relying on this for your future? Are you finding peace that this earth is not your final destination? Like, one of the greatest things that we struggle with is trusting in our hearts that this is not our home. Like, we put so much time, so much energy, so much faith and trust in this planet filled with death. Are we truly trusting that this is not our home and that we were created for a purpose beyond what we see today, beyond what we have here on this? So be encouraged not by what you will receive as material, but be encouraged by who you will receive. Be encouraged by the creator of the universe saying, he will come for you. He will take you to himself. He will be with you. If Jesus says he's going to do something, that means it will be done. Everyone on this earth can promise something, and it may or may not come true. We can hope that it will come true, but if we're honest with ourselves, it's just a hope. It's just a guess. I keep promising my son Logan, who has autism, that our house is coming this Christmas, or our house is coming this March, or our house is coming. But all I can do is just hope. I can't speak something into existence. I can't create that thing to happen. All I can do is hope. And that's why I hate that there's these frauds around Christianity that claim to be apostles and prophets. Anytime you see someone online or on Facebook that has the name apostle or prophet in front of their name, run. Like, seriously, run from them. Because we cannot trust them, because they cannot say for certainty that something is going to happen. They always use these vague illustrations and that you can go ahead and make anything make sense. And that is not what we see with Jesus. What Jesus says will be done, and we have to rest in that. If Jesus promises something, it will come to pass. And this is why this is such an encouragement to the phrase, let your heart not be troubled. This is why we must believe and trust and rely on God, because Jesus will come for us. But what do we see the majority of people say, even when discussing thoughts about heaven? Like, when you think about heaven and the possibility of being there soon, what do you think about? What are you anticipating? What are you looking forward to? You'll hear people talking about the streets of gold. You'll hear people talking about mansions, especially hear people talking about loved ones. We hear about a place with no more pain and suffering. Now, these are all true. Well, not the mansion part, but we're not there yet. Stop pressuring me. We often hear, and maybe you are guilty of this too, is what we can't wait for in heaven is to see maybe a friend or a loved one, a parent or a child, a relative or a mentor. And it's not that this isn't a reality. The worrisome part is that it makes it out to be more important than Jesus. And that's what we have to think about. We have to test ourselves. Is our anticipation of heaven for a material thing? Is our anticipation of heaven to see someone outside of Jesus? Now, it's not wrong to want to see someone, but is your greatest anticipation is to see a person other than Jesus, then you've missed the point of Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, let your heart not be troubled. Believe that you will see so-and-so again. Jesus says, let your heart not be troubled. Believe in me, and I will come and get you and bring you to me. Jesus says, I am preparing a place for you so that you can be with me. The goal isn't to be with someone here on earth in heaven. The goal is to be with Jesus in heaven. People, and some of you may have made an idol out of a person instead of worship of Jesus. I'm excited to go to heaven. I'm excited about what I will see, and I'm sure I'm going to say it's better than anything I've ever imagined. But my greatest hope is going to heaven is not any benefit that I'll receive, but whom I will receive. I will come face to face with Jesus himself. I will look into the eyes of the one who actually created my eyes. I will breathe before the one that gave me breath. I will see the one who first saw me and who died for me. My encouragement isn't from what I will receive, but my encouragement in my troubled times is whom I will receive. Take a moment to test yourself and test the reasons for heaven. If you don't find that Jesus is your greatest hope and joy of heaven, it isn't because you don't know Jesus. It's that you don't know Jesus as well as you should. I'm not saying that you're not saved. I'm saying that you have way too low a view of who your Savior is if your anticipation for heaven is of anything other than Jesus. Okay, so what about this Father's house? This big, big house with lots and lots of room. This big, big table with lots and lots of food. This big, big yard where we can play baseball. Nobody wants to play football in heaven. It's all baseball. I'm just kidding. Actually, since I brought it up, the song Big House by Audio Adrenaline is the result of actually this me-centered problem that we have in heaven. And this broke my heart this week because the worship team were joking about how we're going to play Big House for the first song. We were going to do a slowed down version for the second song. We're going to do a remix for the third song and bring it on home. But if you haven't been a Christian in youth group in the 90s and early 2000s, you may not know this song. But it's all about materialism. The evangelism is telling people about why they want to go to heaven, but Jesus isn't mentioned in the song once. All the benefits of heaven are laid out, but none of the reason that's truly for heaven, which is depressing because I know all the hand motions to the song, and you may too. I don't know. But back to the topic. Jesus says, "In my Father's house there are many rooms." The Latin Vulgate translated this to mansions, which is why the KJV went with that interpretation. But a better, more accurate translation is dwelling place. All of heaven is the Father's house. Hear that this morning. All of heaven is the Father's house. And there are many dwelling places within heaven of the Father's house. And what is Jesus doing? Jesus is going to prepare a place for us in heaven. The point is not that there are lavish rooms for us to stay in. The point is that there are ample provisions made and more than enough room for every child of God to be there. Like hear that again. The point is not that there's lavish rooms for us to stay in. The point is that there are ample provisions made and more than enough room for every child of God to be there. So the idea of our own mansion really isn't an accurate translation. It is misleading. And I personally believe, though, it'll be even better than anything we can imagine. If you followed me on Facebook recently, you'll notice I've been posting a lot about my astrophotography and all the different things of space that I've been capturing with my telescope. And as I've been looking at these images, they've been more amazing and more incredible than anything I could have ever imagined. Heaven's going to be like that, something more incredible, more wonderful than anything we could imagine. But the most incredible part of heaven is that we'll be reunited with God, which is exactly why our hearts should not be troubled. Let us not be troubled by the temporary things of this world when we have eternity as our future. Let us not be troubled by the shifting winds of society when we have the constant glory of heaven before us. Let us not be troubled by the leaders that miss the mark when we have Jesus to look towards. In my case, let my heart not be troubled by my temporary housing when eternity awaits. It's impossible to think that we are all here doing great and that we're all here this morning doing just fine. The reality is that we're not fine. The reality is that we're not okay. If every one of us were honest, we're probably barely hanging on most days. This is such a timely message because it's a constant reality. We're one step away from insanity on most days. If you were bringing kids this morning, you may have hit that mark of insanity right before coming here. Like Nolan, my youngest, had a meltdown because I wouldn't give him ramen for breakfast this morning. Like we almost didn't make it here to preach God's word over ramen this morning. So we are constantly on this plane of insanity and right before a meltdown, but that's why we are given this incredible message. Everything is pointing you softly or loudly to look away from yourself, away from this world, away from your situation, and to look to Jesus. The answer is to believe in God, believe also in Jesus. Are you taking your situation before God? Are you taking your frustrations before the Creator? Have you spent time in prayer knowing that Jesus is our mediator? But don't just believe the facts about God, but give your mind, your heart, your entire being over to God. Trust in Jesus, rest in Jesus, rely on Jesus, look to Jesus. Like the chair this morning, don't just know about God, but fully embrace him. He is our hope in what seems like a hopeless world. Then and only then can we be encouraged by what awaits us when our job here is finished. It may not be a mansion, but it'll be greater than anything that we can imagine. Greater than a mansion? Yeah, greater. And it'll have Jesus there. May we as a congregation be encouraged to continually point our troubled hearts to the one who heals the heart and who ultimately will heal our mind and our soul. Not necessarily in this life, but 100% in the next. Amen? All right, let's pray.